Hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look back at the previous week in football and soccer, whatever you like, and discuss the things that we thought were interesting. I'm Tom Rennie. Alongside me is one of the most hard-working broadcasters in all of sports media, a man who needs to keep on working just to keep topping up the Botox budget. It is the impossibly young-looking Brian Dunseth. Hi, Dunny. You all right?
I can move my eyebrows, bro. It ain't Botox. It's just like high-grade facial lotion that my wife makes me put on.
Do it again. Do it again. Yeah, but they're moving, but there's no lines here. There should be lines.
There you go. Look, it's just clear. I make it blurry as I step back out. It's like my TikTok girly phase a little bit.
Look, whatever you're doing, it's working for you.
Cheers.
You mean, like, I remember once seeing Rod Stewart, who's doing the legend slot at Glastonbury. A few years ago, he was on like TFI Friday with Chris Evans, and he was like, "Why do you look so young?" And he was like, "I use oil of Olay every day, slap an entire bottle on his face."
Yeah.
Which A, is true. B, he looked very slick. But C, it's probably Botox, isn't it?
Maybe.
Probably the
Or he's a
Botox.
baby seal, whichever way. No, Rennie, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for asking. Was fortunate enough to be with T.O. Max on the what do we call it? MLS Eastern Conference semifinal, Orlando City at home against Atlanta United. And it was a one-off game. We went from the round of three, where you went straight to penalties after 90 minutes. This is the knockout game. So after 90 minutes, you did have the potential for extra time and then potentially heading to the penalties. We'll talk about Seattle Sounders and Jordan Morris and their goal in the final seconds before going to penalties, knocking out LAFC. But yeah, man, this is the business end of the season. We have clarity after this weekend that either LA Galaxy or Seattle Sounders are going to be the host of the 2024 MLS Cup final. And that's dependent upon who wins next Saturday evening out at LA Galaxy. They were on fire, smashing Minnesota United 6-2. But it was fun. I got to Orlando City's coach, Oscar Pareja, was my former teammate. We were teammates up in New England Revolution. We were teammates down in Dallas. And just salt of the earth, fantastic human being. His team has the same type of personality, the dark arts, getting stuck in, disruptive, causing mayhem, and then with flashes of brilliance going forward with guys like Facundo Torres and Ramiro Enrique. Unfortunately for Atlanta United, I thought, and for those MLS heads out there, the MLS After Darkers out there, I thought that Atlanta United team might have had a little bit of a sprinkle of a 2009 Real Salt Lake team that needed 7 different scenarios on decision day, the final day of the season, including a win for them to even make the playoffs. They ended up knocking David Beckham and LA Galaxy off for the top spot in the MLS Cup trophy back in 2009. And it just felt as though with everything going wrong for Atlanta United this season, making it on decision day, going to Montreal and winning that play-in game, then knocking out Inter Miami and Lionel Messi, it was a 34-point gap difference between Lionel Messi, best record in the history of MLS with Inter Miami in the regular season, and Atlanta United sneaking in on deadline day. They had actually beat Orlando in Orlando 2-1. So there was it was an oddity in the game, but I mean, if you're not gonna mark players on corners, you're begging for problems. And Ramiro Enrique, here's a quick little side note. His dad was the player that played Diego Maradona's Hand of God ball. He served the ball to Maradona, who did the Hand of God, and Ramiro Enrique is his son. So Max Barreto says, this is why I love Tio, because he pulls stuff out of nowhere. He said when Ramiro Enrique scored the header, he said his dad was a pistolero and he's a son of a gun. And that was in his goal call. And I literally, like, I'm getting ready for my goal call. I got tears because I was crying, laughing in the side. And I look over at Max and I go, yes. Like, what a great call that is. Because that's just
Did we
T.O.
just
Max.
become best friends?
Yeah. Yes, we did. Yeah. So that's, God, my eyes are watering because it was so funny in the moment just thinking about, like, I'm literally like, I write down the goal scorer. I highlight it real quick in my book because I know he's going through his call. I'm ID'd everything, and I'm like about to take a deep breath so I can jump. And it's just when he says, his dad was a pistolero and he's a son of a gun. And I was just like, you're fucking awesome. And this is why I love you. Sorry, Tim.
I want to talk more about MLS a little bit later because I want to find out who you think is going to win it, a bit more LA Galaxy, maybe some Mascherano as well, confirmed as Inter Miami coach. Love the way Messi is basically just like hiring all the old dudes, all the old crew to work around him, just pissing it up in Miami for another year. So we'll talk about that a bit later. But I wanted to start with this Man City story. Now, we're recording before the Champions League game in midweek. So our last Man City experience was the Tottenham game at the weekend. I was working on the game, so I want to tell you what I think about it as well. But I want to come to you first on it because it's a 4-0 defeat against Tottenham Hotspur, which nobody saw coming, which, to be fair, we should have done considering Spurs continually find ways to beat Manchester City, including in this run. The first of the 5 defeats in a row was against Tottenham, but we still all completely wrote them off, me absolutely included. I thought losing Van der Ven and Romero, whatever the scenario, would be too much for Tottenham, but of course it wasn't. And in terms of Man City, I mean, there's loads of interesting stats on this. It's the first time Pep Guardiola has ever lost 5 games in a row in all competitions at any of his teams. Man City, the first reigning top-flight champions to lose 5 games in a row in all competitions since Chelsea. Not that Chelsea. Chelsea in 1956.
Oh, wow.
So this doesn't happen to teams in England's top flight ever. And I did very much enjoy it. You know, I love chants. We used to have a feature on my TalkSport 2 show. I'll chant to anything, because any chant that goes around, you know, the stupidity of crowds, I will get involved in it. But I did enjoy sacked in the morning. You're getting sacked in the morning from the Spurs fans to Guardiola for like 20 minutes of the game at the Etihad, from Porro's goal to like the Johnson goal. But what's happening here? I mean, look, Rodri's missing. Absolutely. We take that as read. That is going to be a significant loss to anybody, but it feels like a lot more is going on, Dunny. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I don't, expert analysis. I don't know. Like, I don't know. If Pep can't figure it out, how are we supposed to figure it out? You know, we can talk about players missing, and rightfully so. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, with Foden's opportunity early, Erling Haaland's opportunity early, it feels like, and I've been on a lot of teams like this. When you're down on your luck and you feel like everything's gone against you, meaning that, you know, you take a heavy touch when you expect to take a clean touch. The deflection as a defender, you get a toe poke and actually hits the attacking player in the shins and ends up in behind you, and then he's got the jump on, you're chasing. I don't see any. This is the weird thing. I watched the game. I was on the plane watching the game. I don't see anything different. I don't see anything structurally, tactically, style of play. It is odd, though. It seems like every time the ball does go out to Kyle Walker, his hesitancy to serve the ball, when he gets that open touch, he opens up and he shapes like he's going to serve the ball, but he never serves the ball. And he takes a touch and he rolls it. And I don't know if that's like trying to create passing patterns or variations of service for him with the runs in the box, or he feels like the runs aren't being made quick enough for him to just whip a ball in. But it doesn't, I don't know, just keep an eye on that. It was something that I've noticed the last couple of games. He's not serving the ball early. And he's actually oddly getting beat for pace more often than I can remember seeing him get beat for pace. It always felt like no one could get around. Now, that being said, that's not this is not a Kyle Walker issue. This is top to bottom an issue. And we could talk about fatigue and we talk about all these things. And I would push back gently and say, hold on, if we're going to talk about fatigue, well, then we got to talk about the manager not using the 5 substitutions and the timing in which he is using the substitutions. If you are trying to rotate, protect, and think about fatigue at this stage of the season, and quite honestly, since COVID, since 2020, the amount of games that these players are versus the time they've had off. But pure dumb luck. But I'd also say, in an odd way, they came up against a team that now we still struggled to comprehend, and that's Big Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham Hotspur, a team that can play up here when the opponent's up here, and then plays down here when the opponent's quality is down here. It's the first team I can I guess verbalize in a while that they realistically play to the level of their opponent every single game, or at least in this last 8-week stretch where, you know, they're dropping results you never expect them to drop, get handily taken apart by teams. Ipswich Town is a good team, but you know, they took Tottenham apart, and then Tottenham does what they just did, and you're just like, well, hold on a second, who the flying squirrel are you?
I've got a Tottenham piece. I do have a Tottenham question for you, which I want to get to, because I just want to read the results for you because they're insane. But before we get onto the Tottenham half of things, The question I've got for you is about the future for
Mm.
Manchester City, because I think the performance, you can have an off day, you can have an off run. I do think the Rodri loss is significant with the times he would have swept up. Would he have swept up the Guardiola mistake, which leads to the Spurs second? I think he probably
Second.
would.
Yeah.
Would he have been there for Grealish's loose pass in the midfield? Would he have stopped the breakaways with a couple of terrible fouls? Would he have brought down Kulusevski before they have the break for the third? I think all that's probably true. We'll never know, but I think it is. But the question for you is about Pep Guardiola maybe taking his eye off the ball with this squad.
Mm.
Because I do wonder if partly they've been a bit more cautious with the cash because of the ongoing issues with the Premier League and the 115 charges. And look, it's a sports washing project. That's what this is. And we talk a lot more about Man City in court with the Premier League, and then in the Champions League they're booing the UEFA anthem, and then being at loggerheads with the authorities. We talk about that a heck of a lot more than this being the greatest team ever. And so that's going to be a negative for the ownership group. I wonder if they're trying to be more compliant in the future so this stops happening. That might be part of it. But also, the whole Guardiola will he, won't he? Then he does, then he signs a new contract. And I was looking at this squad, and I know a lot of people have picked this out. Ilkay Gundogan came back from Barcelona. He's 34. He's a finisher. He's absolutely not a starter.
Mm.
Kyle Walker, lots of talk about whether that Timo Werner moment was a Gary Neville moment when Gary Neville asked to get taken off because he knew his career was over, infamously. Not sure about that, but I would say that being exposed at fullback like he used to be able to stop Vinny Jr. and Mbappe. Now he can't stop Mitoma and Timo Werner. Again, it's a level down. They're still really good players, but they're not the two best left wingers in the world. Kevin De Bruyne, when he comes on, they look incredible. When he's not on the field, it's evident their number one most world-class player has not been available for a long time. I think just 4 starts this season. Kovacic always injured. John Stones always injured. Bernardo Silva looked a little bit knackered in this game, was really playing at left back. I highlight this because the rebuild is now. The rebuild is going to be massive and, back with huge money. I'm sure it'll be doable.
Mm.
But Guardiola's not done this before, and I wonder whether he was thinking about winding this down. And the fact now he's going to wind it all back up again because there's a 2-year contract and he's going to oversee this rebuild, it makes me feel like that wasn't the plan. But he's changed his mind, and over the last year, he wasn't thinking about the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. He sort of took his hands off the wheel, and now the squad looks ill-prepared and ill-equipped to take on Liverpool this season because at an inflection point where new players needed to come in and take over from De Bruyne and Walker, they're not there. They're not ready. And we might be in an actual transition moment caused by the fact Guardiola was actually thinking, I could be on the beach in May. And then suddenly he thought, oh, no, wait, I like to work, actually. And I've got nowhere else to go. And no one's going to pay me this sort of money. So I'm going to do two more years. What do you make of that theory?
Well, and I'll speak from a Manchester United perspective. When Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill both left, David Moyes, Moisés, walked into a team that was incredibly aging in real time and effectively needed to be turned over potentially between 8 and 15 different players over the course of the next 2 or 3 seasons. For this group, you're right. You go through this. You're gonna have to figure out Ederson. You're gonna have to figure out Kyle Walker. You're gonna have to talk about John Stones and the injuries. There's no doubt about it. Ruben Dias and Vardial, Ake, all of those great. Akanji. You can add a couple pieces here or there. De Bruyne. Are the whispers of him going to San Diego and MLS true? It seems like that's more likely than him heading to Saudi Arabia. Gundogan is an important band-aid for a season like this. But Kovacic was, I think, short term. This guy experience. Chelsea want to dump him. It's a fantastic addition to the group. Obviously, Rodri, you got to figure that out. Rico Lewis, Oscar Bob, those type of players are extraordinarily talented coming through. Grealish is in a weird spot, man. It doesn't feel like he's going to be leaned upon in any way, shape, or form as the Jack Grealish game in, game out, 90 minutes every single weekend, as seen by the last year and a half. Doku coming in, as well as Savinho, I think have taken significant minutes from a guy like Grealish. And I wonder, I wonder big picture, what's this look like for him? Bernardo Silva, the whispers have been talked about for him going to Barcelona for the past 3 years. So no surprise there. Phil Foden, Erling Haaland, they're not going anywhere. So what? You're looking at roughly 5 to 7 players that you've got to start thinking about. Um, I mean, listen, I think that I wrote this down too with the EPL vote 16-4, the associated party transactions, the APTs, might not have fully gone into the favor of Man City, but I think it loosened some of the stringent policy of allowing, Etihad-esque type deals to happen with Man City. Then could have a trickle down effect to the Newcastles or the Nottingham Forests as well. But yeah, I think there's a couple subjects happening. To your point, the havoc with UEFA and the Champions League anthem and all of that, unnecessary. But I can understand what they're trying to say as a fan group and the history of that. Is it a bit unnecessary? Yeah, because it just draws a bit of a target onto Man City. Everything that's happening with the charges, the 100 and some charges, that and the pushback and the fight, there's always going to be the likes and the dislikes, and I think that creates its own unnecessary havoc as well that they're going to have to deal with because inevitably they become a target. So for Pep, he obviously sees this as, going to be, I don't know, in not so many words, the biggest challenge of his career, because he's been at the top for so long with City that now whatever this current blip is, whatever this roster blip is, whatever they are planning for or having to think about with summer transfer windows or winter transfer windows, the reality is they've got to make some changes. They've got to make some adjustments because maybe some of the players that they have put so much faith in over the year, and rightly so, they got to figure it out.
Good point, well made. Listen, we'll move on from that because I want to ask you about Tottenham because there are questions to answer with the City moving forward, but I think that lots of people have also said like, some of the younger players you mentioned, Doku and whatnot, being 23, 24, that's all well and good, but for the fact they're not as good as the older guys. Jeremy Doku is not Kevin De Bruyne. He's not going to win you 4 titles in a row. Not yet. Sure, maybe he will, but not currently. But in terms of Tottenham, I did just want to ask you about this because this is the run of results that are it's so... We said this in commentary a couple of times, Chris Perry and I. Like, if you want to know what Spursy is, it's this. Crystal Palace hadn't won a game in the Premier League when they met back end of October. They beat Tottenham by 1-0. There's a Carabao Cup a few days later, and Tottenham beat Man City. Lots of rotation, but in the end, it was a good Man City team, and Tottenham deserved to win that game. Good game. They then take on Aston Villa and pump them 4-1, a good Aston Villa team, and they beat them heavily. They go to Galatasaray, a game we spoke about, I think, last week or the week before, where he played a weakened team, Postecoglou, and lost that game. Then they take on Ipswich at home, the game they rested players for against Galatasaray and contrived to lose against Ipswich. That was their first win of the season. And then international break happens. They go to Man City and beat them 4-0. And you've played the game, you analysed the game, you've coached the game. Explain this to us because we as fans don't get it.
It shows you how good these players are. And at the same time, I think the amount of experience needed in some crucial positions, or at least these players are learning in real time, some crucial positional moments where you're either going to win the game or you're going to lose the game. And they have a very distinct system, and with the height in which they draw that line, there's going to be moments if you can play direct and get in behind, you can cause some havoc. That both outside backs at times are going to be bombing forward and trying to at least at a bare minimum support. I think that for Tottenham, they seem to be most vulnerable in possession. And when they start to overload and start to underlap and try to get more players forward and start crisscrossing positional play and trying to drag players around, when they do become loose with possession, that's where I think at this level in the Premier League, there's a lot of teams that are even bad teams, quote unquote, bad Premier League teams that can still punish you, can punish those type of mistakes. So what I see is a naive team at times, but an exceptionally talented team at times that they can go and it's almost like, the easiest way to say is when you're in these tournament formats, and obviously this is a league table, but I'm using the analogy of when you're in these tournament formats and you're coming up against a team that's so much better than you, you're just like, F it. Sorry, Tim. Let's just do us. And all of a sudden, start a little bit more confidence, little bit less erratic, a little less nervy. And then all of a sudden, you get a little swivel of the hips and you send some guy the other way and you're like, I got him. Like you start, there's like it's like a vibe thing. You start like feeling yourself as a group. And then all of a sudden you look at the guy and you're like, oh my God, he did that. I could do that. Yeah, I'm better than him. And then you start building upon that momentum. That's what this feels like. It feels like, and I joke with Headley and Gabe Ortiz all the time. Rest in peace, Survivor 47, Gabe. He ended up getting
Spoiler alert.
Yeah,
Spoiler alert.
He got knocked
Jesus.
out. Sorry.
Oh.
It was tough. Headley ruined it for me, so I had to ruin it for you. Headley texted me an hour before. He's like, Gabe, it was a good run. I was like, Headley, I'm on mountain time, you dick. Sorry, Tim. And he's like, sorry. Apologies. No, but it feels like a team that when they know they're not supposed to win, or hey, this could be a statement game, all of a sudden they take it to that next level. They just are capable of jumping. But then again, it's weird. It's weird being chased. How many times over the course of the seasons do we see teams in fourth or fifth position at the turn of the new year, and all of a sudden there's expectations and there's pressure, and they're the target? That's a weird thing to digest as a player. When someone else is the target and you're chasing them, it's easy. But when you're the target, there's a weird psychological thing that happens where all of a sudden those small little mistakes become, massive, massive issues for you structurally, technically, and all obviously from a winning and losing perspective.
Listen, I want to get to some other stories. Before that, some housekeeping. If you are subscribed to this program and you're listening to it and you're on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, leave us a great review. A 5-star review is always appreciated. And if you can write a review, write us a review as well. And we'll read out the best ones on the show, which we have done in the past. There's some that we can't read. We still think they're funny. And if they come with 5 stars, you can basically say whatever you want. And if you're listening to this program, that means you like it. That means you've got at least one friend that like soccer and football. We do both because I don't want to get involved in that row. Then tell one friend this week to subscribe to and listen to Week in the Tackle, which you can watch on Spotify and on YouTube, where you can subscribe separately as well. You can also follow us on social media, search for Week in the Tackle, but don't go on that website. For me, I'm on Blue Sky now. I'm doing Blue Sky because of the oligarch and the fascism. So I've been that off. Anyway, that's housekeeping for this week.
Yeah.
Let's get on to a couple of other stories, Dunny. Not a great deal of time on this bit, but I did want to ask you about it because at Leicester, Steve Cooper has got the sack. And,
crazy.
Well, it seems crazy, right? Every Leicester fan I know has said, like, he had to go because we were crap. But then everyone who's not a Leicester fan goes, well, he came in to replace Enzo Maresca. He's only been in charge of 14 games. They're not in the relegation zone. They've scored plenty of goals. I don't know what you're expecting. So, look, I don't know. We can't get involved in that necessarily.
Yeah, but can I stop you right there? Yeah, can I stop you right there? Because this whole idea that he's not Enzo Maresca, the only reason why they're saying that is because Enzo Maresca is dealing with a £2 billion roster at Chelsea Football Club. Enzo Maresca would be nowhere near the position that he's in right now with Chelsea had he been with Leicester City. And I would use the similar analogy that, hold on a second, Steve Cooper, the run that they had at Nottingham Forest to get promoted, obviously you have to change. The structure's different. The players that you're losing in that promotion bid is different. And then all of a sudden you go from like Lone Army and some bit players that are pretty championship-esque type of players to what it looks like in the Premier League. I guess the flip side of this is I was kind of thinking about it. How many games has Steve Cooper won as a Premier League manager? Not many.
20%, 30%, something like that.
I would bet he's probably in that maybe 8 to 10 win window in the
Gotta be better than that.
2.5 seasons before Nuno came in.
I'm looking up what you're telling us, but it's going to be reasonably low.
Yeah, because let's look it up in real time.
It's 22%. 22%. A points per game record of 0.91, so under a point per game. Okay. At Leicester, it's 20%. At Forest, it was 38%, which is not too bad. Premier League only.
So he did have that run in the end of his first year, but it's so okay, fine. You make the decision.
That's 4 defeats in 5, though, at 22%, essentially.
Great. No problem. Why didn't you fucking do it before the international break? Sorry, Tim.
That is stupid. Yeah.
I mean, like, why would you give him 2 more weeks and then you lose the game? The players go to Denmark. They're out of order with some of the stuff that's happening over there. It seems like Enzo, we
I
missed
want to, I
you.
want to ask you about that. I do want to
Yeah,
ask you that bit. So yeah, hold on
yeah.
that bit.
So again, it just seemed like if you were going to make this decision, okay, we'll give him one more game. But then why would you go into the international break thinking to yourself you're going to give him one more game? On top of that, I'll say what I always say: anybody worth their weight in gold in terms of managing whatever this looks like for Leicester City would already have 3 to 4 managers. And I know they got done by Maresca leaving and going to Chelsea. And so they had to
Yeah.
make a short-term quick fix. But if you're Leicester City, again, I'm not positive where they're at from the financial fair play standpoint, but
Bad.
it's not great, Bob, not great.
Mm.
But you think about there's 3 or 4 managers currently available that at a bare minimum, like why not go make a run at Ruud van Nistelrooy? Like if you're not going to get Moisaya, right? You're not going to get Graham Potter. Then why not go make a run for a guy that's already been a manager in a different country? He just had a year's experience or half a year's experience. He looked good in the 4 games that he had for United before Amarim comes in.
Mhm.
I mean, let him try to do his magic.
Well, whoever it is, I can tell you this: they didn't have someone lined up to come in to replace Steve Cooper after the sacking on the Sunday. The
Then
Chelsea
why
game was on
sack
the
him?
Saturday. So then why do it? I mean, and I have it on decent authority that they thought Graham Potter would say yes this time, even though he turned them down in the summer.
Hmm.
They went back to him again apparently this week, and he again said, "No, I don't want the job. I told you in June I don't want this job. Nothing has changed." So it seems like they broke up with the current girlfriend before lining up the next girlfriend, which, as we all know, is the biggest mistake you can possibly make in life. But
Can I really quick before we move on?
you've done that.
Where? But Graham Potter, like, what's he
He doesn't
waiting
want to
for
work.
at this
It
point?
doesn't want to work.
Like, I know
He
he's
wants
got
to be a
monopoly.
consultant.
Great,
Yeah.
that's fine. But like, then why would you do the whole media thing? Whatever, 3 months
Because he
ago.
thought he was going to get the England job.
Oh,
That's what he thought he was getting. He thought he'd be the England manager, and
so
after the
Lee
whole Lee
Carsley.
Carsley, the Carsley debacle, who was going to be England manager, then it wasn't going to be him, and it should have been Graham Potter, and they panicked and gave a German an 18-month contract. So what he wants to do, I don't know. But let me just ask you briefly about the
Yeah.
Denmark thing, right? So they lose to Chelsea,
Yep.
and then Connor Cody, Harry Winks. It is the 2 Danish players. It's Holmand and Christensen. I haven't got that wrong. I've not got the notes in front of
Christiansen.
me.
Yeah.
Christensen. So they're there, and they've gone, I assume, for like a birthday or something. Whatever. You can go and have a party somewhere. It's fine. But like, when the manager is getting sacked, and you know he's getting sacked, if he got sacked on the Sunday, the players would have known what was coming on the Saturday. You get the vibes around the place. You know, you read the media, you hear people. They go to this party. They're holding up what looks like a champagne bottle firecracker, having a wild time in this club. There are phones everywhere because, spoiler alert, the Premier League is very popular in Denmark, and these guys would be famous in this club. And then someone's holding up a kind of light box sign, which is "Enzo, we miss you," or words to that effect. It just feels like another. Again, I'm not one of those people that's like, Marcus Rashford went to America to go to a basketball game in his spare time. Like, I'm not, sorry, Tim, one of those people. I think that's really dumb.
I think you
But
could
also, can you? I don't know, just in
I
case.
think so.
But is this a dumb thing to do? Like, what is this? It didn't come
Well,
across great.
the first thing I thought was there obviously was some type of friction between the players and the manager.
Yes,
And
they didn't
again,
like
like,
him.
yeah, well, and listen, I've played for managers that I despise. Like, I didn't want anything to do with them. I mean, I tell the story all the time. We'd go through an entire week worth of build up for an opponent, and the leader of our team, we'd be in the huddle right before kickoff and be like, "F everything that guy said. We play our way. We know how to play." And it was like, you appeased him during the week and you went through it, but you just couldn't. You just in one ear out the other. Everyone would just look at each other like, "We know what we got to do." And we actually, you probably kept the guy in a job a lot longer that way. So when I see this from experience, you're always going to have that one knucklehead, couple knuckleheads within the group. Banter wise, they're going to bust balls. They're going to be hilarious. And there's always going to be that, "Oh my God, dude, what are you doing? Like, don't do that." Like, those type of moments. But it's also a message. They obviously didn't like what Steve Cooper was doing if you're going to come up with that. If that is 100% from the players. If the players did that, or if it's like one of your friends that was like, like one of the Danish boys, like one of his friends was busting balls, like, Enzo, we missed you. Like, oh, he's just stitched you up big time. Like, then that's pretty funny. But if it's
Yeah.
from the player's perspective, that just indicates that the decision for Leicester City's hierarchy to make this decision from the board's level to fire him, to sack him, um, I know we'll never know the truth. Well, maybe we will. The Canaries will start singing, and maybe there'll be an athletic article. But it makes me feel as though the something way more nefarious happened
Yeah.
before the loss to Chelsea. That was the final straw for them to make that decision.
I mean, look, I do think that one of their friends has striped them up with the lightboard sign. I do think that's more than
Be
likely
pretty
what's
funny.
happened. I'd be
Yeah.
surprised if Connor Cody did that. But also, people have phones. There's a sensitivity to what is going on. I don't know. I'm not saying players when they lose should like go home, eat gruel, and whip themselves with a cat of nine tails. But I don't know. Maybe don't go to a rave in Denmark the day of the loss against Chelsea. I don't
Well,
know.
it's that's why I'm lucky, man. Like the stuff that we did, we
Well,
would lose a
phones,
game.
man,
Yeah, it's
phones.
phones. That's what it is. It's phones. You can't get away with anything nowadays. Like when I ended my career, it was right when Facebook was starting to become a thing. And it was still like
Killer.
MySpace days. And so the only thing that you were worried with, to be quite honest, there was a thing called Big Soccer. And for all the OG MLS After Darks out there, Big Soccer was like, it was basically like a Reddit board of just soccer.
Mm,
And people would get, like, oh, I was with this guy last night and we did this. And like there were some great stories, but they were always just a little bit off. So it's like, this guy's full of sorry to cursing a lot today. But yeah, no, I mean, you used to be able to get away with everything. You can't get away
yeah.
with anything anymore.
I mean, even if you're not doing anything particularly like nefarious or whatever, like anything can be twisted. Everyone having their phones out all the time. Like it's of all the bad things that are happening now in the world, the fact that everyone has got a fucking high definition camera, sorry, Tim, on them at all times is
Hmm.
probably the worst thing. Like it's the worst. No one can cut loose. And
Yeah.
then there's every chance the next day, whatever, like you took your shirt off for 2 minutes and suddenly it's back page news if you're like Connor Cody or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just bollocks. The other story I wanted to get to before Heroes and Villains was what is happening, MLS. We're at the conference final stage. MLS Cup is next weekend, December 7th. That'll be either in Seattle or in LA, depending on who wins that one. It's Orlando City against New York Red Bulls. It's LA Galaxy against Seattle Sounders. Galaxy scoring goals galore, 6 against Minnesota after the Hudson River Derby. New NYCFC, New York, they lost their manager. He was, I think they wrote parted ways, I think, for Cushing. So I don't know if that means he
Yeah.
resigned or was sacked or whatever. I don't know how that works out. Maybe you can tell us. But it's not like, apart from Galaxy, maybe the most spectacular set of names we could have in the conference finals. But from a football fan perspective, it's pretty decent. It's pretty unpredictable.
Well, and by the way, Galaxy is a completely different team than they've been for the last 5 seasons, effectively since Bruce Arenas left. The Galaxy are back, man. They've got a definitive statement. Will Kuntz, who was a part of the Yankees, he was over at MLS and then at LAFC before coming over to LA Galaxy a year and a half ago, has been fantastic. Anschutz, Phil Anschutz is an owner. His name is transcribed or not is inscribed on the MLS Cup trophy. He spent money. Peck, Paintsel. You've got Ricky Pooch pulling the strings underneath Jovic. The team looks fantastic, and they're scoring a boatload of goals. But this is this year. And remember, LAFC on the final day, pipped them for the top spot in the Western Conference, and LA Galaxy would have had home field advantage, including hosting rights, had they not lost to Seattle Sounders in the dying moments of extra time and that Jordan Morris goal. So, visually, from style of play, they're the most fun to watch. And Ricky Pooch is all over the place. He's got the freedom to find the game, extraordinarily talented. And they could have had 8-9 goals against Minnesota United. I was shocked at how easily Minnesota United broke down defensively, considering Eric Ramsey's group has been fantastic for the previous 8 games. And he set them up really to be competitive, combative, and to win games. Jordan Morris in the dying moments. I was watching this game out on the East Coast. It was like 1:30 in the morning, and I literally fell asleep a minute before Jordan Morris scored the goal. And when I opened my eyes, it was like the credits, and I was like, "Ah, Sorry, Tim. And I like scrolled and I saw Jordan Morris scored. So I like spent 5 minutes trying to find the video, found the video, the celebration, the final whistle immediately after. So credit to Brian Smetzer, Craig Weibel, and everyone. Seattle's an interesting group because they lost Nico Ladero in the offseason. They brought in Pedro de la Vega, the Argentine, for about $5 million. He was injured for the most part of the year. For this last maybe like 6 or 7 games, started coming on, but still wasn't like the number, quote unquote, number 10. Brian Smetzer gets a new deal after significant pressure from the local media. If he was the right guy going forward, he's been involved since the early 80s in the Seattle Sounders as a player and then subsequently as a manager, multiple titles, multiple levels. But they didn't spend any money in the summer. And they rode this team, and now they're in a conference final once again. And then Orlando and New York Red Bulls, Sendo Sports has Red Bulls really, really combative, playing really well. Carbajo hits an absolute bomb, the Uruguayan, from about 30 yards out. They were playing at Citi Field, not at Yankee Stadium. And then, finally that Orlando game, Ramiro Enrique scoring a great header. So it'll be Orlando at home against New York Red Bulls Saturday in the early afternoon. Then it'll be the nightcap of LA Galaxy Seattle. The MLS Cup final will be on the West Coast. It'll either be at Galaxy or at Seattle, depending upon who wins. But to your point, yeah, all the sexy teams are out. Inter Miami's out, Cincinnati's out, Columbus is out, LAFC's out. These are not the teams that we thought, based on regular season performances, style of play, goal scoring ability, that would be anywhere in a conversation about not being at an MLS Cup final. So while it might not be, quote unquote, the most high profile MLS Cup that I think maybe the executives and Apple TV and MLS were hoping for, because it's obvious having Messi attached to anything is just outrageous numbers. From a style of play, it just goes to show you the nuance of the conversation in MLS of what is the regular season and what is the playoffs. The regular season, incredible. It's very easy, identifiable, home, away, your record, stands, goals against, all of those things. But when you get in the playoffs and you get in these, like Real Salt Lake didn't lose 8 games in their final season and knocked out because they went to penalties. Houston Dynamo, they lost their series in penalties. It's a weird animal, and the dichotomy of the conversation of what are MLS Cup playoffs, man, it's a juggernaut. It's a battle, and it's really small, monumental moments that changes whatever the competitive atmosphere of prediction looks like.
Do you think they'll change the format again from
I
the
hope
3-game series to the 1 game? It's weird. It's 1 game in the semis.
I can tell you. I mean, the simplicity of the simplicity of the creation of this way is that ultimately, if you've made the playoffs, you've been guaranteed a home game, and guaranteed a home game outside of the play-in game. So 8 and 9 is 1 play-in game, but it basically means that, as owners, you're rewarded for your team qualifying for the playoffs, that you get a home game. And I mean, you could make throwing numbers against the wall anywhere between, say, $900,000 net to upwards to multi-million dollars based on, what your fan base and the size of your stadium looks like. So I personally like the format. I like the variation. I like the play-in game. I like the 3-round series because it's the weight of being able to win on the road versus being at home. And usually teams are extremely heavy home field advantage favorites. So to see these teams like an Atlanta United go down in game 3 to Inter Miami, get punched in the face twice and end up walking away with the win is pretty extraordinary. So I know it's more controversial and it's not as normal as people want to make it out to be, but you got to win your games. And whatever the structure and the format is, it's very similar to what we saw in the Leagues Cup. You got to figure out a way to get through.
I quite like the 3-game series bit. I thought that was pretty cool.
It's fun.
Very American. It's only American if you have to explain the rules of the game multiple times to people before you play it. That's how American sports are. And also,
is that kind of like Champions League now?
Yeah, pretty much. It's gone very American, isn't it? Yeah. The kooky league table. And just one final note on that. I watched the Galaxy game against Minnesota because I've been told multiple times they were going to score lots of goals. And the Gabriel Peck second, which is start of the second half, 70 yards?
Yeah,
just brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Great player. He'd love that bowl of disappointment with Gabriel Peck.
By the way, you know what it's doing is I think it's important for guys like Gabriel Peck to come to the league. And what's happening in real time, and this is just my soapbox, is that you're seeing higher investment level. And now even spending 5 to 7 million isn't a sure hit in Major League Soccer. These owners are having to spend upwards of 9 to 10 to 15 million for a sure hit. Kevin Denke, who just signed with FC Cincinnati from Bruges, is $15 million, the Togo international. And it's interesting to see. And I think this is where Jorge Mas and all the ownership groups that are coming in that are multi-billion-dollar owners, but also have interests in other soccer clubs around the world, also interests in NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, is that now at the ownership group table and the strategy and the strategy committee, if you will, they're saying like, hold on a second, this works in this league. This is applicable in this league. I know it's not the same sport, but this is working over at the NHL. I think what's happening in real time, and people always really try to dismiss the level of Major League Soccer, but what they're missing is the stratospheric growth that's happening, and the level's much higher than they want to give credit for. And in this short-term bump, it's similar. It's completely different than the David Beckham effect. The David Beckham effect put eyeballs and butts in seats. What you're seeing now is a business strategy and structure that is academy driven, it's training facility driven, it's stadium driven, and then you're seeing upwards of anywhere from 16 to 25 million, discretionary spend on some of these rosters. Yeah. So players like Diego Gomez, who comes in to Inter Miami, is now going to be sold on to Brighton for 15 to 17 million. Gabriel Peck's going to come in, opportunity. So if you see more and more Colombian, Argentine, Venezuelan, Brazilian players coming in and recognizing that I won't be hurt from my national team perspective if I'm playing in Major League Soccer, I'll actually be seen as this is a guy that has an appetite for experience and opportunity. And then you see that jump from MLS then being sold to Europe. I think that's that next step, because MLS is always acutely aware that they can't participate on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, right? That's the one thing Champions League, MLS will never be able to compete with. But in the meantime, how can they structurally make themselves strong enough that players from around the world, as well as coaches from national teams, are going to see that this isn't a step down, it's actually a step up in the right direction?
Listen, I don't want to run out of time for heroes and villains, but I got to ask you briefly. Give us a minute on Javier Mascherano being the Inter Miami manager. I mean, is his trainer going to get a job soon? What's going on here?
I got my list. I always got my handy dandy notebook out. Austin FC, Josh Wolf was fired right at the end of the season. Jim Curtin, unceremoniously dispatched from Philadelphia Union, never saw it coming. Tata Martino, never saw it coming. Although during the press conference, I will point out, he kept saying for personal reasons, but then he kept implying that he would be back in a job for 3 months, which, thank God, that doesn't mean that there's like health issues, like he's not dealing with individual health issues. But for whatever reason, I just hope that this wasn't a Messi versus Tata situation.
Of course it was.
And that's my fear,
Messi
right?
runs the place. Of course it was.
And that's kind of the fear, right? So I'll tell you what, for Atlanta United, you wonder if they pick up the phone and say, is there an exploratory conversation with Tata based on what he did previous? And now that the hierarchy behind the scenes looks different, and I would assume the relationship with Arthur Blank, Home Depot Arthur Blank, is still there for Garth Lagerwey. Vancouver got rid of Vanni Sartini, one of my favorite personalities, cult of personality in Major League Soccer. That was a shock to me. And then today announcing that Nick Cushing had left NYCFC. And who was it? I think it was Arsenal Women. Didn't they? They were the ones that were linked.
Yeah, that was the story last week, but he hasn't got the job or anything like that, as far as I know.
I was shocked. I know there's constant. So 1, 2, 3. So Nashville, Atlanta, San Jose, Dallas, St. Louis, Austin, Philly, Miami, Vancouver, NYCFC. 10 managerial changes in the season of 2024 and counting right now. We're a big boy league. There's accountability for performance. And I think one thing it says is that you're moving on, and you're not saying, well, I owe him a year or two left on his contract, we can't make this move. I think there's a decisiveness that's happening despite, money being owed to managers that are still around. To your point about Javier Mascherano, listen, it's obvious, the links to the players themselves: Barcelona, Argentine, Argentine U20s, Argentine U23s. This will be his. I'm interested to see who's a part of the staff. For all of this, for all the jokes and the butt of the jokes for this, Scaloni in Argentina. I mean, if you can figure out a way to make it work and not be the target and be able to be kind of the conscious voice for the players, then so be it. But yeah, it's certainly going to be a challenge for him to find that unique balance of, are you working with Lionel Messi and in conjunction with Lionel Messi for the way that this team plays and the way that he manages his group? Or how does he find the unique balance of now being the boss and calling the shots and holding people accountable, and holding your former teammates accountable? That's that's going to be a big challenge for him. But he got a 3-year deal, which implies that they believe in what he's capable of doing, and they struck very quickly from the announcement to the signing. I think the reports were within 24 hours that Mascherano was going to be the guy upon Tata Martino announcing that he was leaving.
You know what's funny to me about this? I was out near the Lyceum Theatre a few nights ago, near Embankment in central London. And I'll never forget being there nearly 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago. And I went for a drink with a friend of mine, and he passed me the Evening Standard. I opened it up, and it was Alan Pardew on the back page with Carlos Tevez and Javier Mascherano on the back page, having just signed for West Ham. And I remember going, is this real paper? Is this really happening? And it happened only a few short months after the FA Cup final, when Lionel Scaloni was pressured by Jamie Carragher. And if he wasn't, he wouldn't have kicked the ball out of play. It would never have gone to Steven Gerrard, and we'd have won the FA Cup. But I'm over it. But it's just funny, 18 years later, I was back there a couple of days ago, and we're still talking about Javier Mascherano and Lionel Scaloni. It's funny old world. That takes us to heroes and villains. And I'll start with my hero this week, me. And the reason I'm the hero this week is because I have been a bit down on West Ham this season, for obvious reasons. They've been pretty crap. So bad, the only team they could beat is Eric Tender Resignation's Manchester United, and even they should have won 5-0 on the day, except for the fact that they could knock snow off a rope in the first half. So on Monday, I was going to watch Newcastle West Ham, but to be honest, I just felt so bummed about it. I was getting to kick off like 7:55 or whatever, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to walk the dog. And so I got Jasper on his lead, and I was getting ready to go out, and I looked at the TV in the front room just in time to see Alexander Isak open the scoring for Newcastle. And I was like, yeah, I've made the right decision here. So I went out, walked the dog. I had my book on, so I didn't know what had happened. I got back in the 80th minute or so, and my wife opens the door, and I was like, tell me. Go on, tell me. She was like, do you want to know? Tell me. And she was like, you're winning 2-0. And I was like, what do you mean we're winning 2-0? We're 1-0 down when I left. What are you talking about? But from the moment I walked out of the house to the moment I came back, West Ham were great by all accounts. I've watched the game back. They played pretty good. Carlos Soler, Abercrombie and Fitch model turned out to be quite good. Paqueta had his first good game in 6 months. Nobody would have bet on that. Don't sue me. And all this sort of stuff. You know, Todibo was good. Kilman was good. Wan-Bissaka was good. Fabianski made some good saves. You know, they were really good. So basically what I'm saying is, Saturday, West Ham against Arsenal. I'm working at 3 o'clock. But when that's over, I'm going to find my dog, and we are going to go for a 3-hour walk. So when we beat Arsenal Saturday, that'll be thanks to me as well. They are better if I'm not watching. So you're that superstitious. Yeah, it keeps on happening. It keeps on happening to me. Like when they beat Watford the year they could have gone down, I kind of sat in the garden and didn't watch the game and came back in. They were 3-0 up before half time. Villa away a couple of seasons ago. I thought, oh, we're going to lose this, and then they'd won it. Where was I? It was one of the Europa League games I couldn't watch, and I was out, and I came in and found out they won. I forget the game now. I might have been the Alkmaar first leg.
Well, but what about you went to the Conference League final and they won?
Yes, but if I can't be in attendance, in attendance, it's watching it on TV that screws them. Okay. So that's what I'm doing wrong. Don't watch the games on TV. So
Lopetegui, if my man watches you on television, you're in trouble.
Let's do some villains for this week. Dunny, give us a villain.
Yeah, my villain is going to be, for those that have ever traveled out of Orlando's International Airport. Once you check in and you go through that nightmare line of a security, you have basically 2 options. You can take that train this way or this train that way. I chose this train that way because that went to my gate. I have gotten on the wrong on the wrong shuttle one time, and that was very dodgy. Almost missed my flight. But it's 5 a.m. I ended up putting it on Instagram. I got to get to my gate. I wanted to get a little food at the Delta Club Lounge, but as we're like halfway there, thank God I had my arm wrapped around the pole that was standing next to me, like a little stripper, because nobody pulled the e-brake, but all of a sudden, the full speed train comes to a screeching halt, and there's nobody, like, it's just electric going back and forth, right? Nobody's driving this thing. Comes to a screeching halt. The guy next to me, or like off my back shoulder, goes ass over head, full tumble, hits the ground. We all come to a screeching halt, and then we're just stuck there for like 25 minutes until someone could walk the distance in between. I guess kind of flip it, reswitch it, turn it on, all that stuff. But I got to be honest with you, man. Like, I don't know how to explain it was the villain, but the moment in which you just need to get to your gate and you're exhausted and you just woke up at 4 a.m. to get through, and it's a 40-minute drive, and you get through that nightmare line security, and you almost eat ass as you're coming through and flip over the top. I was just trying to let the guy know, like, hey, man, you might want to leave a phone number and a contact information as you do the tumble. Maybe think about being litigious, not only for the tumble, but for the 25-minute wait before they crawled us back into the station and we were able to move on our merry way. So hold on to polls. They're your friends.
Your villain is so how would what would I title your villain? What was it?
The title of the villain is Hold On Tight. That should be the title.
Because I thought I'm not sure how comfortable I am with the phrase "eat ass" being as common as you used it.
That's when you wreck. Yeah. You wreck.
Yes.
Wreck.
Sorry, Tim. I guess. Listen, no real time for this. We might do it in more detail later, but I will just say my villain is Mo Salah's weird kayfabe interview on the bus when he left St. Mary's, because it's very difficult to get Mo Salah to speak. It's very difficult to get star players to speak. And yet all of a sudden he's happy to give a seeming off-the-cuff interview to a gaggle of reporters as he gets on the bus about, I'm more out than in. Like, there was no reason to do this. He's going to sign a new contract if he wants one. There'll be an offer. He can decide whether to sign it or not. There's just with the Real Madrid game coming up, with the Man City game coming up, with the good vibes and the positivity and his brilliant form. Yeah. It's the best he's looked in like 3 years. Like,
hairline looks amazing.
He's shaved off the chest hair. He's suddenly grown more abs. The stuff on the side, what's that called? The wings or whatever. He looks incredible, the guy. Incredible shape. He's playing incredibly, but like, shut the fuck up. Sorry, Tim. But just like, there's no need for it. No one believes you were just caught off guard. It was obviously planned out between him and his agent to put some public pressure on Liverpool to offer him a new gargantuan contract. Yeah. They will offer him the contract they feel is appropriate. He is under no obligation to sign it. And there's no reason to play this out in public, especially this week. I'm not saying he's like selfish or whatever, like Carragher did on the telly. I'm just saying this was clearly intentional, dressed up to be an accident, and is totally unnecessary. And it does lack a bit of class from Salah and his representatives. And he's earned a fortune out of Liverpool. He's repaid it, right, with his performances, sure. But like, there's no reason to sour this publicly in this way. I don't know why you do it. And if you want to do it, I prefer it a bit more honest. You know, do it a bit more honest and come out publicly and say, I would like a new contract and here are my terms, as opposed to, oh, well, I'm rather out than in at the moment. Oh, I don't know if they'll offer me one. Oh, I'm just in the dark.
But what's the number? Right? I mean, what's the number? What, he's on $350 a week and he wants what, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? Like, is it a guaranteed year thing? I mean, I can't imagine how much more money he wants at this stage of his career, because the decline, it's going to be more of a decline than an incline. Yeah. So I would agree with you. I mean, I think it's a great villain, because you top of the table in Champions League, top of the table in the Premier League. It's such unnecessary havoc, because now Virgil van Dijk is going, and again, Chris and Orlando and all these people will say, well, this is how you put pressure on FSG. This is how you get the contracts done. But Trent Alexander-Arnold, Virgil van Dijk, and now Mo Salah, the more that they continue to talk about this publicly, the more unseemly it becomes. And it's not going to be fair for a guy like Andy Robinson, that's going to have to come out and then, hey, what do you think about Mo? Then, guys don't want to be in that situation. They don't want to deal with that. Sorry, Tim.
We know it's happening. Everyone knows it's happening, and it just wasn't necessary in November with the Man City game coming up. But there we go. That's what they decided to do. Consider the pressure on, I guess. Great work. Right, we are out of time for this week's Week in the Tackle. Thank you, Brian Dunseth. I've been Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the program. Leave us a 5-star review. Recommend the show to a friend. Watch it on Spotify or YouTube. And we shall see you next week.